Good evening, everybody. Welcome. We'll go ahead and give everybody a few minutes to join and get started here shortly. All right, it's 7:01. We'll go ahead and get started. Thank you and welcome to an update on the Capital Crescent Trail 2.0 facility plan. We'll first start with some logistics. So we've got about 90 minutes scheduled for tonight. We'll have about a 20-minute presentation, and then the rest of the time, about 70 minutes, will be open for questions and comments. The meeting is being recorded, and the slides and recording will be posted on the Capital Crescent Trail 2.0 project page. If you have any questions or comments, you can enter those into the Q&A box. There will also be an opportunity to speak at the conclusion of this presentation. If you'd like to speak, please use the raise hand feature, and one of our hosts will unmute you, and then we'll mute you after you're done. And please keep questions or comments to a minute or so to ensure everybody can participate. After everybody's had a chance to ask one question, we should have plenty of time to come back for more. So to update, again, on the facility plan study limits, we're looking between the DC line and Bethesda Ave. The sections of the Capital Crescent Trail in DC, as well as the future sections along the Georgetown Branch right-of-way, are not a part of this study. So we first held two listening sessions, one in person at Somerset Elementary School and one virtual listening session, which was on a weekday around lunchtime, and simultaneously held a online survey, which generated over 442 generated 442 responses. We asked questions about general likes and dislikes, suggestions for the trail, as well as ask questions about trail characteristics, amenities, priorities, things like that. So this preliminary planning process started with the kickoff sessions that I just highlighted, with the public input, and then existing conditions analysis, planning recommendation development, and now presenting the planning analysis and collecting further public input that then will lead to the start of the facility plan itself. So looking at some of the existing conditions, we started with a master plan review, looking at the Friendship Heights and Bethesda downtown sector plans, as well as the West Barge sector plan. And then also looked at recent documents like the bicycle master plan and pedestrian master plan to see where new and future connections should be considered. So we also, in looking at the existing conditions, while large parts of the trail are in relatively good shape as far as the asphalt itself, it doesn't have quite as much tree root heave as other portions in DC. But there are still some rough grades, some shoulder issues with erosion and kind of a drop off, as well as the worn paths on both sides here. We've got a fair amount of amenities along the Capital Crescent Trail. You can see the benches on the left side. One's a little newer than the other, but neither is accessible to people who are in a wheelchair or a mobility assisted device. Same for some of these amenities here, as well as the newer Neil Potter Plaza does have a little bit more accessibility. Some of the signage along the trail, well, actually, most of the signage along the trail is pretty old and in pretty rough shape. You can see the mile markers, the paint's peeling and cracking. There's some vandalism on some of the signs. The lettering is coming off, and then the signs are kind of faded. So the signage along the trail is in pretty rough shape. We do have some cultural resources and interpretive signage along the trail at the Loughborough Mill, for example, as well as a newer sign that was installed here through our Untold Stories program. And then along the trail, we have several locations where we have stormwater management. For the most part, it's these infiltration trenches that at this point are pretty heavily kind of clogged with all the sediment that's kind of ended up there, as well as some other areas for stormwater and drainage along the trail. We also have a lot of vegetation management going along the trail. These are some pictures from the Little Falls Watershed Alliance showing some of the great work that they're doing. And the next few slides, we're going to present kind of an overview of some of the trail use. You can see that in 2020, we had a peak. Let me pull this back up. 2020, you can see we had a peak compared to some earlier highs in 2016 and 17, but trends are kind of coming back up in 2023 and 2024. When we look at the monthly usage, we see the highest use in June with a little drop into July and kind of steady through the summer and dropping off into the fall. Generally, kind of April to September, October seems to be the kind of busiest time of year. Looking at daily trail use, we see Friday, Saturdays are typically the highest use days, with Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday all being relatively flat. When we look at the hourly usage, we see at both locations kind of a early 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. peaks. And then interestingly, at Bethesda Ave, we see a lunchtime peak. We have a lot more pedestrians on at the Bethesda Ave, near the Bethesda Ave counter. So this is probably people grabbing lunch, where we're not really seeing people out quite as much midday. So now we're going to highlight some of the public input we received, as well as kind of some of the takeaways from that. So at a high level, we've kind of got some general likes. And again, I mentioned earlier we had 442 responses. So these numbers right here are showing, for example, that 78 people out of those 442 mentioned that they like the connectivity to Bethesda. So covering some of the general likes, the trail connectivity, easily getting to destinations in DC and Georgetown and Bethesda, connectivity, easy access, proximity to home were also important. The safe and comfortable riding experience, the lack of cars, the limited at-grade crossings, the relatively gentle grade and grade separation were all appreciated. We also heard from people using the trail in a variety of ways between biking, commuting, walking, running, exercising. And then one of the biggest things we heard is that people like the natural and peaceful environment, the wooded nature, the forest, the shade that the tree canopy provides. And then finally, people like the conditions and characteristics of the trail, the fact that it's well maintained and paved, the length that it provides, and the width. Some of the things that people did not like, I don't think this is going to surprise anybody on the call, but user conflict and crowding and lack of modal separation on the trail were huge issues. It's one of the busiest trails in the region, and it's congested and has a lot of use. We also heard from people that bicyclists and fast bicyclists and e-bikes were all major concerns, as well as pedestrians, dog walkers, and pedestrians walking two or more abreast. We heard a lot about a lack of trail etiquette, so a lack of courtesy, a lack of notice for passing and passing too closely. And then a little bit about the lack of amenities, so lighting, restrooms, signage, drinking water, things like that. We also heard that the width and pavement condition aren't great, that there needs to be some repaving, that the two at-grade crossings need some improvement, and a few other things covered up here. And then I mentioned this a second ago, but the at-grade crossings, particularly Little Falls, as well as just the general trail access and connectivity to bike infrastructure were really important. So we asked the people who filled out our survey how frequently they use the trail, and most of the people responded that they use it once a week or more. We had a few people who only use it a few times a year, but generally pretty heavy use amongst the responses. And then most people who responded are either biking, walking, hiking, or jogging and running. We asked people to rank the priorities in which we should be improving the trail, and kind of broke it up into 5 logical sections just at kind of the main intersections. And interestingly, pretty much going north-south, we see the priorities start the highest between Little Falls and Bethesda and slowly tapering down towards the DC line. We asked people about their preferences for trail widths and heard that people would like to see it widened significantly. The trail currently is 12 feet near Bethesda Ave, but tapers down to about 10 feet for the rest of the trail. So widening to 14 feet or more would be a significant change. But again, this is just asking people their preferences kind of in a vacuum. We also asked about modal separation. So the idea you can see in this image here that you'd have cyclists on one side of the trail separated from pedestrians and those moving a little slower. There could be a buffer or some sort of physical separation there. This is just one kind of large piece of pavement that's striped. But we did hear from 279 people, a little more than half, that they wanted to see some sort of modal separation. We also heard that people, particularly runners, enjoy having either the kind of crushed stone shoulders or other kind of natural surface shoulders. Um, and then we also asked people, this slide here shows, so in the blue, you can see what people rated as their favorite amenities, and then in orange, you can see what people rated as missing amenities. So benches, water fountains, and restrooms were the three most kind of favorite amenities, and then restrooms, water fountains, and lighting were the three largest missing amenities. We heard a lot about network connectivity along the trail. In a lot of places, there's no accessible trail connection. There's little bike connectivity connecting to or from the area, or in the instance of the connection kind of through the drainage area to Sangomore Road and the shopping center there, that's not a paved or accessible connection. We also heard about the importance of connectivity to the surrounding trails. So the Georgetown Branch Trail, which is currently kind of the future Purple Line section, which is under construction, which will actually connect to create a direct connection to Rock Creek Trail, which will be huge from a connectivity standpoint. And so we took all of the kind of input that we received and the existing conditions analysis and use that to kind of come up with a few recommendations. So we have two short-term recommendations. The first is to develop a wayfinding and signage plan to upgrade the signage along the trail immediately. As I showed, the condition of the signage is in really poor shape and is in need of a major overhaul. So we would look to kind of revamp and redo the trail rules signage, some of the courtesy signage, such as bikes yield to pedestrians, speed limit signage, potentially adding some of the radar responsive speed limit signage. And then one of the big things we need to do is to clarify what types of e-bikes are allowed on the trail and what types of motor vehicles aren't allowed on the trail. So this is an example of a sign I mocked up based on an example from the Trans-Canada Trail. I mentioned the mile markers earlier, which are in pretty poor shape, and so we'd also be looking to redo those as well as wayfinding. We only have one or two spots where we have any wayfinding on the trail right now, and so we could look to add more wayfinding signage to direct people to nearby bike facilities, but also to help potentially orient them to where they are on the trail. The other short-term action is to do some sort of trail courtesy campaign. A lot of the complaints that we heard were basically just a lack of courtesy and a lack of good behavior. So finding ways to reinforce that good behavior through some sort of campaign, I think could help to improve behavior on the trail. We also have some long-term planning recommendations. So these aren't included in this project as they're a little bit beyond the scope of redoing the Capital Crescent Trail. But Parks does want to support the development of the low-stress bike network that's integrated with the Capital Crescent Trail. So we've got a few examples here. For example, connecting the Capital Crescent Trail to the Little Fall Trail on Hillendale Road, extending long-term buffered bike lanes down Little Falls Parkway, connecting some of the bike infrastructure on River Road and Massachusetts Ave. So we'll look for opportunities to support that development with SHA and MCDOT and others. And then getting into some of the kind of preliminary program of requirements. So this really sets the kind of the framework for which the facility plan will handle some of the design and kind of aim to meet these goals. So the first is to update the trail design. As I mentioned, parts of the trail 12 feet, most of the trail is about 10 feet. And so, based on the kind of shared use path level of service calculator, which kind of takes the volumes of the trail and looks at how wide the trail is. Widening that trail to 12 feet is kind of called for and necessary. It is worth noting that this is a pretty constrained corridor, and so it might not be a full 12 feet everywhere. But with the survey that we have, we'll be able to kind of evaluate that better. We also would like to look at introducing modal separation where feasible. The northern sections of the trail have a little bit more space and also have larger percentages of pedestrians using the trail. So there is a good case to be made for introducing that. So this would primarily be north of Little Falls Parkway, but we'll be evaluating that as part of the facility plan. And then the final thing is to prioritize trail users at the existing at-grade crossings. So we have a project at Little Falls Parkway right now, but there are some improvements, for example, at Dorset Ave that could be made. For example, shifting the speed hump here over to the trail to make this just a raised at-grade crossing would be a little bit safer. Generally, we need to look to improve trail accessibility and connectivity. So I mentioned this earlier, but most of the amenities aren't really accessible. And on top of that, a lot of the major connecting streets or cross streets, for example, Bradley Boulevard in this picture, is not accessible for all users. This one has kind of the bike rentals, which is helpful and somewhat convenient. But again, we'd like to look at evaluating all of these potential connections to see where we can improve the accessibility to the trail. We'd also like to expand the trail amenities. So hopefully finding a place to put some sort of restroom or to have something more than just a porta potty like we do now at the Bethesda pool, but also improving kind of wayfinding to other restrooms, for example, at the Little Falls Library. We'd also like to find places to add more water fountains, benches, bike racks, and fix-it stations, and also consider more interpretive signage and potentially public art. We are going to evaluate the feasibility and costs involved with lighting the trail, primarily north of River Road. So we're not recommending lighting south of River Road, but we will look at doing that. It's pretty tight and will likely be pretty expensive, and so we need to balance out the feasibility with the costs in the overall project. But at the very least, would like to add some lighting or improve the lighting at the Little Falls crossing, given the use there. And then finally, from a natural resources stewardship standpoint, we need to look to update stormwater management and drainage facilities. Inherently, there's a challenge with treating stormwater on a 3.5+ mile stretch of land of trail, but we need to look to treat that where we can and improve those existing facilities as we can. And that coupled with trying to improve the vegetation management along the trail, both where it's being cut back and where non-native invasives are being removed, as well as adding native plantings to help balance things out. With this, I'm going to hand it over briefly to my colleague, Mike Lowe, who will be leading the facility planning process to talk a little bit about what comes next.
Thanks, Kyle. I guess as Kyle's kind of wrapping up his portion of the Capital Crescent Trail and getting a lot of public input, our next phase is getting into the facility plan itself. And we'll start that by getting a site survey. Some of you might have seen the surveyors out there along the trail in their orange vests, getting all of the existing information so we can kind of see exactly what we have. We'll start looking at what the data says from all of this public input, and look at some of their old plans and some site reconnaissance, see where we can improve these connections, and just kind of dig into all this information we have. And then we'll start gathering all that information and start getting probably consultants on board, and start working on improving this trail. And then we'll be back out in touch once we start kind of getting this moving again.
Great. So that's the presentation. Where we've held pretty true to about 20 minutes of a presentation. You can use the same form that you registered on to send additional comments after this meeting. We'd love to know if you like what we've just covered, if there's things that we've missed. Generally, would love to hear from you. And then we've got my contact info right here. I'm the project manager for the planning analysis, as well as Mike's contact info here as the project manager for the facility planning section of this. So with that, we can open it up for questions. Again, if you have a question, please raise your hand and we will unmute you as we can.
And and Kyle, I can read some of these questions that we have. We've answered some of them, but it's hard to keep up, so I can read some of these out.
Sure.
From Panella, if you allow e-bikes and other vehicles that can get to the trail from long distances away from Bethesda, then you are going to ruin it for local use.
Yeah, so I mean, I think this is a trail that connects DC to Bethesda, and eventually we'll go further on. So e-bike or not, I think we'll have people who are coming from long distances. It's one of the great benefits of the trail. But at the same time, we do have concerns about the fast cyclists and are looking at how we can help to slow those down and make it a trail that really works for everybody.
And the next question is from Panella again. I can see that my input is useless. You are viewing the CCT as just another part of the larger trail system. It will be at a detriment of Bethesda community, Bethesda Avenue, and our local community.
All right.
And
Let's
I can just have can we I don't know how to unmute. No, I can't.
Yeah. Yeah, so Patella, we'll go ahead and all right, it looks like you're unmuted if you want to go ahead and talk.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
I've been using this trail for over 20 years, 30 years. I live in Bethesda. I've run my marathon training on this trail. This trail is basically a local trail. And to try to make it part of a larger thing where people can come from anywhere in the metropolitan area and ride up through Bethesda and past Bethesda Avenue and go on to, where the purple line is. It sounds great to you, but it is not great to me. Because I'm really concerned about the e-bikes, because the people on the e-bikes, they can come from just anywhere. They have no connection to the community. They can race by people pushing not wheelchairs, but baby carriages. It's a very nice little trail with people that are local using it. And now you're going to introduce bathrooms and this kind of this thing and that kind of thing, and we're going to have this trail that would just be great. If anybody came from California, they could come riding through this, because it's just a great place to ride through on your way to somewhere else. But it's not a great place it's not for us who live here to have this kind of traffic and this kind of approach to this trail. If you want to make a trail that is a through trail to somewhere else, go make a trail somewhere else. That's the way I feel like it. Because if you're going to crowd, I've taken care of this trail. I've picked up trash, I've pulled weeds, I've did all kinds of things to keep the trail safe for runners and people like me. And I know that if you start letting all this happen, it will be a disaster for us. It goes through
Yeah.
places where people have to stop because cars are coming across to go into their community. It just is not the kind of trail you think it is.
All right. Well, thank you for that comment. We're going to go ahead and we can move on to the next question here. So we have a question from Stu Simon asking if the goal is low stress connectivity, will this project include modifying the speed bumps and all the connecting bike routes so there are gaps for bikes? Totally understand where you're coming from with that comment. For those who don't know, this is the idea that instead of having a speed hump that goes kind of the edge of the roadway to the other, you have kind of cutouts in the speed hump so that emergency vehicles and cyclists can get through there. For this project, we're not looking at we're primarily focused on the trail itself, and so looking at um, the speed humps on connecting streets would not be part of this project, though we're happy to advocate for that. I also see another question from you, from Stu. Instead of putting the bike guide on the side of the staircase, there are plans to make sure all future guides are the much more sensible in the center of the staircases. I know that's what we have in that picture I showed on Bradley, but we can certainly consider that as we can. So thank you. Again, if anybody has wants to ask a question with their mic, please raise your hand. Otherwise, we'll keep going through the Q&A here. James, we've got your hand up. We will unmute you in 1 second here. All right, James, you should be able to talk now.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, I was just wondering if y'all have looked at any other large trail renovations that have happened elsewhere in the country, and what mistakes were made or successful innovations in those trail renovations that we hope to either, avoid the mistakes or emulate the successes.
Yeah, so I mean, there's a lot of good comparable examples that we can look at and definitely take best practices from, especially when we're looking at kind of the modal separation and how that's been introduced. There's good peer examples to consider. There's a couple different ways of doing that. At the end of the day, to introduce kind of the proper modal separation, we really need a lot of space to do it. Probably about 16 feet as a minimum would get you, say, an 8-foot trail with a 2-foot buffer and a 6-foot walking zone for people. So we'll do a deeper dive into that. But really, a lot of this project is really comes down to the constraints of the corridor itself, with it being so elevated and such steep drop-offs on both sides. So, we'll look at comparable rail trails and stuff to see what lessons we can take from there. Thanks for your question there. Richard, you're up next.
All right. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
All right. Thank you. The Capital Crescent Trail was conceived and purchased by the county and developed through a master planning process and regional planning as a trail that serves as a regional trail for the entire community, and as a linchpin in a greater network of evolving trails and connections for bicyclists and walkers. So I would like to see you respond to the challenges on this issue with the background history on the trail in the future, and about the trail needs. I think this bias that I'm seeing, it may be due to budget concerns, but we need to invest in this trail as the major trail and part of a linchpin of a network that it is, and the high demand and the latent demand that we see in the area. So I would like to see trail that is not that's not widened beyond 12 feet for all trail users, but a trail that has a 12-foot two-way path and for wheeled use, and a separate walking path alongside of it for joggers and strollers and casual walkers. And in particular, I'd like to see your attention and ask you what your thoughts are on the connections of the trail to Massachusetts Avenue. That needs a connection that is far better than the inadequate steep connection that we have. And the Bradley Boulevard connection, really, we need, when we're talking about connections, we need to make them for all people and for all users, which includes parents with trailers and kids trailers and wheelchairs and the whole variety of wheeled human powered modes that we have. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Richard. So yeah, as we've collected the survey, now you kind of evaluate the feasibility of some of these connections. At Bradley, for example, the master plan calls for a new connection to happen when that site redevelops. And so, that's one option, to wait until it redevelops, but we also want to take a look to see what we can do kind of in the near term. So thanks for your comment. Holly, we got you next with your hand up. And you should be unmuted now.
Yeah, and you can hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, so thank you. I think these are really great ideas. I use the trail every other day to run on, and I also use it every weekend to ride my bike. I can understand the first caller's concerns about, being afraid of more congestion. But I will say that as was obvious by the data that you showed, it's already well used. And even there, I know, and depending on time of day, when I've gone, it's been fabulous to be able to ride my bike down to DC as a local, way faster than taking the metro or driving. So I just wanted to show my support for that. And one of my questions is how we might be able to be involved. I think I was so excited to see that you're looking into a crosswalk across Little Falls between River Road and Mass Ave, and possibly buffered lanes there. I think that's fabulous, and I wonder, there could be an easy short-term fix there. You just painting a crosswalk on the existing speed bump, and then I think better thought could go into making that even more advanced and safer. So my question just has to do with, is there a way that we as local citizens can offer feedback to the design of that as you look into it going forward, and how might we be able to?
Yeah, so let me go back to that slide that showed some of these. So these are all kind of called out as long-term kind of aspirational goals. So I don't want to mislead you in showing this connection here. We are interested in that. We don't have kind of an immediate term plan or project that's going to address that. But we will, continue to look at that and figure out how to get that done. So I would say if you saw my contact information on that last page, it'd be great if you could send me an email. I know I've heard from a few others about that crossing, and so we can talk offline and get a little bit more info about kind of how you're using that and what you'd like to see happen there. So.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I'd be happy to I know a bunch of parents are interested because our kids will be going to school soon, and being able to use that would be fabulous. So we will try and get them together to contact you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. All right. Not seeing any other hands up, so I'll go back to the Q&A. P&P, I guess Parks and Planning has many financial problems as any other county department has, yet we really need good upkeep, vine removal, maybe planting greenery to keep it beautiful and cooling in the summer. Might it be possible to have high school kids earn credit while helping with maintenance? That's a great idea and really gets at some of the issues as far as just how many acres of land the Parks Department maintains, and the challenges with kind of battling some of the non-native invasives. So that's absolutely a potential opportunity. We do have other volunteer opportunities that we do with high schoolers. So I'll pass that recommendation on to our Weed Warrior program and see what we can do with that. Let's do another one or two of the Q&As. Did I hear correctly that you don't regard additional restrooms as something you can afford? So a big part of the facility planning process is coming up with the design and then coming up with the cost estimates of what that design is or will be. And so we haven't really started the investigation into where a restroom might go or the cost estimates of what it might be in those locations. But that was the number one missing amenity that we heard. And so we do want to try to identify a location that we can add a restroom to. So, and not necessarily, we don't regard it as something that's additional that we can't afford, but we need to understand the cost impacts of it before we do that. So, and then this is a good follow up. Somebody had a comment. I do think there needs to be some restroom facilities, even porta potties, at some point along the trail, and then arrange obviously to empty them. So, we parks are. Doing not a Capital Crescent Trail specific study, but we're doing a parks-wide study on bathrooms and usage. So we'll be taking a much closer look at this and what type of restrooms might fit here. All right. We've got a comment that I would prefer the planning process not overdo the signage. Montgomery County roads often have so many signs that there is no way to read them all. Similar signage on the trail will ruin the park-like feel. Yeah, that's a great comment. You don't want sign clutter. You don't want signs to take away from the natural, kind of beautiful setting that is part of the reason we all love the Capital Crescent Trail so much. So there are things that we can do to consolidate some of the signs, or at least have better consistency in the signs. Separately, the most common sign on the trail right now is a sign that lets you know that they plow the trail during snow emergencies, which kind of gets to not overdoing the signage. I'm not sure that that's the most critical piece of information, while it is nice. Richard, you got your hand up again, so we can go back to you.
Okay. Okay, thank you. I'd like to see the plan earlier at this stage and not later. Work with the fire and rescue services on addressing access for medical responses, evacuations, and brush fires. The access that's needed for these kinds of uses and small vehicles that need access. They also need to have a good way of locating the incident, which Arlington County actually has running a pretty advanced system designed for that kind of situation. So I'd like to see you do that. And I really appreciate the comment earlier from Holly on an access to West Bard and to Westland Middle School. That really needs to be done, and done now. Westland Middle School does not have a local catchment of students. The students come from farther away from the school than right next to it. It's an odd situation. That's the way it is. So kids from my neighborhood go to Westland, and the trail would be a great way of getting there if they could connect better to the school. And we need to look at more aggressively at these interconnections, these trail connections. We need a trail connection, as was mentioned, to the Sangamore Shopping Center that does not use the current paved steep trail that is totally impossible. We also need a trail connection to Westbard Avenue, following the stream from the trail to behind the shopping center on River Road. That would serve to keep people out of the risky area of River Road of having to travel from getting off the trail and on or alongside River Road up to Westbard and the shopping areas there.
Yeah. So
I think there's one more, Kyle, but I'll just one more connection that we need that we don't have. But this is where we need to go, and I'd like to see some design thought, even if we can't afford it now, but some design considerations in doing a trail crossing of River Road that does not use a bridge, but allows River Road to be elevated a few feet and a trail at grade underneath. That facility would serve pedestrians on River Road, not trail users, and it would also serve better trail users, some of whom decide not to use the bridge, the overpass, and use the crosswalk in its current configuration. And the bridges are problematic when they're steep like that because they induce speed variation on the approaching and ramps and increased risk of crashes. All right, thank you.
Thanks, Richard. So I'm going to try to comment on a few of those things. So from the emergency access standpoint, we have been coordinating with fire and rescue. For example, we've shared the location of the mile markers, the location of our bridges, and the location of our access points, so that they are able to incorporate that a little better into their kind of emergency response routing network. But we've got more work to do coordinating with them on that. You mentioned the Sangamo Shopping Center. There is an existing kind of connection that comes up along a drainage kind of path here. Most of that's off of Parks property, and based on kind of our staff investigation is not really feasible. So we are still interested in either improving this section or finding a way to make a better connection to those shopping centers. And then same with kind of the Westbard and the Willow Branch Greenway as long-term goals. Going back to the Q&A, a comment from or a question from Leslie. I love the trail, but often don't use it because of the speeding bikes that whiz by with no warning, no noise, and they pose a real risk of injury. I don't know if there are stats or crashes of injuries, but there needs to be a way to more strongly enforce the rules for bikers. That's a great comment and a great question. We did start doing some enforcement last year. One of the challenges with doing the enforcement outside of like the motor vehicle versus non-motorized stuff is a lot of cyclists don't have a speedometer on their bike. So you run into the issue of ticketing somebody who maybe doesn't know exactly how fast they're going. But even outside of actually issuing tickets, we can do a lot through just having a greater presence on the trail, doing some more educational events, and then again with a courtesy campaign and improving kind of some of the programming along the trail, we can hopefully help to improve user behavior. So kind of goes into this next question from Marco. Thanks for organizing this meeting. Are there any actions being taken to enforce speed limits and the types of motorized bikes allowed to be on the multi-use trail? So again, we can look to increase our presence and whether or not we're actually handing out speeding tickets. I think having a presence on the trail and letting people know that this is the expected behavior, and then enforcing that when it's not followed are things we definitely can look to do. All right, seeing no hands raised, so we'll go keep going through the Q&A. Is there consideration of the types of bicycles that will be allowed on the trail? I'm so tired of dodging 50 to 70 pound electric bikes and bikers weaving through walkers going 25 to 30 miles or even more. How will speed and vehicle type be controlled? The path is now an accident waiting to happen between speeding bikers and pedestrians. Um, so again, this goes back to, let me pull up a previous slide. There's two things. It was one is further clarifying that, mobility devices, electric bikes and e-scooters are allowed on the trail. Vespas and motorcycles and mopeds aren't. But also spelling out what the rules are. So, e-bikes have to be human powered. They have to have pedals. They can't be just a throttled bike. There's battery restrictions. And at the end of the day, regardless of e-bike or not, because I've been on the trail with people who aren't on e-bikes who've certainly passed me plenty close and plenty fast. We have a speed limit. It's 15 miles an hour. We need to increase the posting of that speed limit. We need to consider using some of the radar responsive things. So again, that if we are um, seeing are going to do enforcement, we can do it right after somebody is literally seeing how fast they're going, and then can enforce it that way. Um, but again, it's also just improving user behavior and trying to improve the behavior and the sharing of the shared use path on the trail. Um, all right. So what happened with the suggestions we made on the last call? Is there anything being done to regulate the bike speed, announcing themselves, and general rudeness? I think I've tried to touch on that, but we need to clarify the rules, encourage good behavior, and then enforce the rules. So um, we've got a comment. I've noticed some individuals who appear to be homeless living along the trail near Bethesda. I worry that this could pose a safety risk, especially for my children. Um, yeah, that's something that we have posted along the trail. Contact information for the Parks Department and Park Police. But absolutely, if we're seeing stuff like that, we can figure out the best way if you reach out to Parks to help provide assistance to those individuals. We got a question. Are there any CCT-based events planned in the future similar to Sligo Creek Fest? Would this be feasible after the trail is extended? Sligo Creek Fest, it worked well because the open parkway has the road shut down, so we've got a lot of available space next to Sligo Creek Trail. Other parts of the CCT are a little more constrained, and so I'm not sure we have quite as much room to do something like that. But would certainly love to explore programming. So that's something we can definitely talk with our activation folks. And if you have any particular ideas, feel free to email those to me or drop them in the chat. All right. I see Mary has her hand up. We'll go ahead and unmute you here. Let's see. Give us 1 second here. All right, do we have Mary unmuted? Let's see. Give us 1 second here, Mary. All right, you should be able to talk now.
It's actually Don, but
Oh.
Mary's my wife.
Sorry about that.
Basic question. Do you have an overall schedule for implementation of the things that you've discussed today? For instance, some of the initial signage and things, when it might be done, and when would the longer term projects going, such as widening the trail to 12 feet and putting the crushed stones shoulders in and things like that? Do you have an overall schedule that you could provide everyone?
Yeah, so I can speak on that a little bit. So these, I kind of touched on these short-term actions, so the wayfinding and signage, as well as the trail courtesy campaign. These are things that we would try to address, honestly, within the next year. Um, it seems, I've thought to myself, does it make sense to replace the signage if we're going to long-term redo most of this? And with us being so early on, and Mike, you can chime in here, but we'll be kicking off kind of the facility planning design, which was going to involve kind of us figuring out what the project actually is, what the costs involved with that project actually is. And then, at this point, we don't have any funding dedicated to this project outside of existing level of effort funds. So once we have designs and a better sense of the costs, we're likely to pursue either grants or, through the next budget cycle, requesting funding for a dedicated CIP project. So, um, Mike, do you want to maybe chime in on how long you think the facility plan kind of design leading up to that will be, and then kind of next steps?
Yeah, I can kind of follow up with that. So this is a long-term kind of project for us. The facility plan, we look at the trail in from Bethesda to the DC line in its entirety, looking at connections, the widths, all the issues, the maintenance issues, the stormwater management, existing vegetation along it, and then we kind of compile all that into what we see as a project and get some costs for that. And like Kyle said, we have to get some funding for it, and then we have to design it, and then designing takes a while, and then once we get designed, then we'll probably make it into different phases, so there would be redoing certain phases of the trail, because we don't want to close the whole thing down. We just want to kind of do sections and improve different sections and in different pieces.
Yeah, but so, a rough concept would be, implementing some of those short-term improvements within the first year. Facility planning's probably a 1 to 2 year process, and then finalizing design and lining up budgeting and figuring out when that kind of schedule. So, this is very much a long-term project. We're likely not doing any substantial work on this for the next couple years. But as we get into the kind of the design and into delineating what the project is, we'll start getting a better sense of project timing. Let's see. We've got a comment from Stu Simon regarding comments on speeding bikes. By far the most crowded part of the trails between downtown Bethesda and Dorset. Extension of the linear park proposed by the planning department along Little Falls would have eased that greatly. I'm wondering if those people concerned about speeding bikes spoke up when our local council member decided to nix that trail. Um, so that's a comment there. I'll just highlight that we are still between Dorset and north of the Capital Crescent Trail installing buffered bike lanes on the west side. So we are still going to improve connectivity a little bit there, but definitely agree that it could help relieve some congestion. I also see a comment about building bike trains to build confidence from Stu, and that's a great comment. We've got a comments about cyclists. It says jerks will be jerks. Runners 4 abreast are a hazard to education. Calling out bad behaviors needed all around. Out of those 440 responses we got, I read probably 30 or 40 that talked about really disliking pedestrians when they're on a bicycle and really disliking bicycles when they're pedestrians, which was kind of an interesting perspective. This is an incredibly crowded trail, and whichever mode you're on, there's user conflict, just the differences in speed between groups. So agree with the education component there. We've got a question about, are you considering snow clearing in the winter months? So the Capital Crescent Trail is the only trail that Montgomery Parks clears during the winter months, in part because it's kind of um, classified as a transportation corridor. So we do clear that. We have 68 miles of paved trails, so to maintain all of those during snow events would be difficult. But given the volumes and traffic on the Capital Crescent Trail, we do clear that. Um, We've got another comment from Marco. Thank you for responding to my original concern about speeding e-bikes. You mentioned relying on people using the trail to practice good behavior. We actually need some serious enforcement. How many park police will be dedicated to enforcement on this trail? Um, that's a good question. We've talked with park police about some of their enforcement efforts and shared some of the data that we have, so that they know what time we're typically seeing the most people out there, so they can kind of target that enforcement. Um, Montgomery Parks has such a large kind of spread of land that what if anybody was at the in-person meeting when we held it for the listening session, we heard just the general challenges um, of monitoring the trail. Having 7 or 8 park police officers on duty at any time for all of Montgomery County. Logistically, it's very challenging to get really strong enforcement on the trail. But there's things that we can do. You know, um, for example, the Metropolitan Branch Trail has a trail ranger program. We could look at doing something like that, or just generally having more of a presence on the trail, whether police or not, I think can help make a difference in user behavior. Right. So we are through the questions in the Q&A. If anybody would like to raise their hand or ask any other questions, this would be the time to do it. All right, we'll give it another minute or two. Thank you for everybody who took the time out of their busy days to come out and listen to this. As we said, we'll be posting this recording online, and let me pull up the contact information page again. You can click the same link that you registered for this on to submit additional comments. And we've got another question. David Andrews, we'll go ahead and unmute you here. You should be able to talk now or unmute yourself. There you go. We can't hear you if you're speaking, David. All right, we still can't hear you, David. If you want to try your mic again, or maybe just type your comment or question into the chat, we'll make sure we can answer that. Any other comments or questions? If so, please feel free to raise your hand. Thanks again to those who've joined us and those who've participated in the public outreach so far. Looks like David's question. Thanks for typing that into the chat. If we have an update on when the Purple Line Trail will be open. I don't have an up-to-date answer for that outside of what's been publicly kind of shared, which I would have to double check on. But we are working with NCDOT as well as NPS and DDOT on kind of coordination on signage and mile markers and things like that. So. We got a question, when can we expect some action on your plan? So again, we'll, from kind of the planning side of things, we'll look to do some short-term kind of upgrades. And then the facility planning process will kick off and get into more detailed design. And so that detailed design is going to help us figure out the cost estimates, the project scope, and help us ultimately figure out how we're going to fund this. All right, well, we'll do a final call for any comments or questions. And otherwise, you've got my contact info as well as Mike's contact info. Please feel free to reach out, either email us directly or go ahead and submit comments through this form. And we will make sure to follow up with anybody who asks us questions there. So thanks, Richard. All right. Well, thank you all very much. I hope you have a great evening, and thanks again for joining us.